Oh man, this thing is absolutely huge. I just picked up this unit on Facebook Marketplace for an absolute steal. I can't believe it. This thing is so big and I cannot wait to test it out. So in today's video, what we'll be doing is creating a single layer half-tone stencil in Photoshop. I'll be showing you the whole process. And of course, I'll be cutting it out on this machine and trying to go a little bit bigger than what we can do on the Cricut. The reason why I'm keeping it simple and just doing a single layer stencil is just so I can test out all the different settings and figure out how this thing works. So let's jump into Photoshop and I'll show you all my tips and tricks on creating single layer half-tone stencils. Let's go. When we're in Photoshop, the first thing you want to do is go up to File and New. So what we're going to do here is create a new document that is going to be the same size as the artwork that we're going to create, or the document we're actually going to cut on the Silhouette Pro. So today what I'm going to be doing is creating a document that's about A2 in size. So what I need is something that's 420 millimeters by 595 in our portrait orientation. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. Now the next thing I need is an image. So I'm going to bring in an image that I want to paint today. I'm going to be using this as my portrait. I don't want to actually paint this entire image, so I'm just going to select the portion that I'm going to paint, which will just be his portrait, like that. So I'm going to hit Control C, Control V, and then delete the one underneath it. So I just have the area that I want to paint. Next thing is to Control T, transform it and scale it up so it fills the entire document. So a little bit bigger, down, a little bit bigger, just like that. All right. Now the next thing I like to do is get the selection tool one more time. Select the entire space within the document, Control C, Control V quickly, just to duplicate it one more time. And the reason why I do that is if you go to the layer below and hit Control T, you can still see the image is extended beyond the canvas, and we don't want that. We just want the image to be within that little area. So we can delete that version, or actually delete that version. So we have this one, which is, if you hit Control T, you see is just in the document. So tick that, that's perfect. And the next thing I want to do is go to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and convert it to black and white. Now that's our image mostly prepared. The next thing we need to do is go ahead and create our vertical lines, which we'll need to create our halftone stencil. So to do that, I have a couple of little tricks which I can show you. What I like to do first is go to View, Guides, New Guide Layouts, and most of my settings are already set from the previous time I've done this. So what I like to do is just go Custom, set a color that's really easy to see, and then set the number of lines that I'd like to set up vertically. So in this case, I'm going to be doing 60, but you can adjust that to whatever you like. So then we hit OK. So now that we've got our vertical guide set up, the next thing we need to do is convert them into vertical lines that we can use to create our halftone stencil. So to do that, I've got a pretty cool little trick where I go to File, Scripts, and all of the members will know how much I love my scripts, so I got another new one for you guys. And if any of the viewers would like to get access to the scripts, then make sure you hit the join button below this video to become a member of this channel, and you'll get access to all the scripts and all of my stencils as well. So the first thing the script will ask you is the width of the line that you'd like. So for this one, I'm going to guess about 60 and then hit OK. And then choose the color. I'm going to go with black and hit OK. And what you'll notice on the right hand is it creates a line at each point of these vertical guides. So now that we've got all of our vertical lines, we go to View, Guides, Clear Guides, so we don't need those anymore. And we've got all of our lines set up. Now each of them are on a separate layer, so I just hit Shift, click, and then merge shapes, so they're all on one. And then what we do is rasterize them, click rasterize, and then click convert to smart objects. And make sure you do that with the image too. We want convert to smart object on both of these because that will come in handy later. So now we're ready to start creating our halftone stencils because we've got everything set up. So the first thing we do is go to our lines, filter, blur, and Gaussian blur. I like to reduce this down to about 20. 20 I find is a pretty good number to start at, or maybe a little bit less. Yep, that looks pretty good. Let's start with that. We can always adjust this later because it's a smart object. And then we can switch that off for the second because we've got a couple of things we need to do to our image. So with our image, we need to adjust a couple of things. So if you go up here to the on the right and click on this adjustments tab, we can start adjusting a couple of things. The first thing we can do is, you can see on the levels area, we've got this little blank area where there's nothing there. If we bring this little tab across, it'll actually brighten the image and increase the contrast a little bit. So that's the first thing we can do. The next thing we do is bring in these curves tab. And on this curves tab, what you can do is click on this little dot in the corner, slide that up to about this point here, and then grab the one in the top corner, select that and drag that down to this point where these lines intersect. I find that's a good starting point. Once we've done that, we can switch our lines back on. And now we're ready to actually create our halftone stencils. So with your lines selected, click on this threshold button here, click that, and you'll probably notice your image turns black, which is a good thing. That means it's working. And then slide this little tab left, slowly, and then you'll actually start to see a halftone line starting to appear. So as you can see, you give a lot of adjustment all the way from, some fairly thick lines with lots of detail, all the way to the left where you get a lot of white in the image. So depending on whether you want to actually paint over the black lines or whether you want to paint on the white lines, you can actually adjust this slider to what you prefer. So for this particular stencil, I'm actually going to be cutting out the white areas. So I'd actually like a fair bit of black to hold the stencil together. So I'm going to slide this around a little bit to about here, and I think that retains a fair amount of detail, especially around the lips, the eye, and the hair. I think that's looking pretty good. But what you'll notice is that all of the lines, especially if I zoom in a bit, are still really rough. So to fix that, what we can do is go down to our image again, and then hit select a layer, and then go back up to filter, blur, and Gaussian blur on that layer as well. And what you'll notice is if you slide this left and right, you can adjust it to a point where you get heaps of detail, or if you slide it to the right, you get really nice smooth lines, which actually looks pretty cool. So you can adjust this to whatever you prefer. So what should I go with today? That's a good question. I think something like this would work pretty good, and I'm going to hit OK on that. And if you're wondering why I don't take these lines all the way through, I would actually like to keep a fair amount of black in here just to bridge a lot of these lines together, just to help keep them spaced apart so they don't start, wobbling sideways when I actually go to cut them out and try to paint them. And I think I'm pretty happy with that. So now once we're happy with everything, we can actually get rid of that background layer. We don't need that. And we can actually go ahead and flatten everything. So flatten image. So we got that. Double click it so we can adjust it. And then we can go to select, color range, select the white for this particular case because I'm actually going to be painting white onto a darker background. And I think that will look pretty cool. So we're going to delete that white area, and I think this stencil is almost ready to go. The only thing I like to do in addition to this is just create a little bit of a black border around the edge. So create a new layer with the paint bucket tool, just fill in that little selection area. So I've got a border connecting all those lines there, and then one on the bottom. And that's just so the stencil holds itself together around the outside areas. And then fill that bottom area in, and probably one across both sides, just so it's got a little bit more rigidity. And one on this side, fill that in, flatten that one more time. Whoops. Maybe just merge down so it doesn't create the white, fill those white areas in. So that's done. So now we can go File, Export, quick export as PNG. I'll probably just save this on my desktop so I know where it is. Single layer. And just like that, our stencil is done and ready to cut. So let's jump into our Silhouette Studio and cut the stencil out. Okay, so with our Silhouette Studio, I do not know too much about this software, so I can't tell you too much. All I really do is get my image, get our halftone stencil, bring it in. So in here, all I really do is click on this page setup, select your machine, feed type auto, I guess, and then the cutting mat. So in this case, I will be using a cutting mat, the big one, 24 by 24, and that's all I guess you really have to do. The only other thing I'm going to do for this particular piece is flip it horizontally. Nope, that's not the one I wanted. How do you rotate it? Yeah, I'm going to rotate it. So 90 degrees clockwise, yeah, sure. And that's just so the cutter actually cuts all these lines from left to right, and that just makes it really easy for the machine, as opposed to having to roll the mat in and out all the time to get those lines. So that should be pretty much ready to go, and then you just hit send button, select your material. So for this one, I'm going to be using heavy textured. I think I'm going to be using this one. Auto cut, yep. Tool, guess it's a manual blade. And I do not really mess with these settings too much, but I'm going to go connect my machine and then hit the send button once I'm ready to go. The Silhouette did a great job at cutting the stencil. All of the cuts were really clean and it was really easy to pull off the mat. I'm pretty impressed actually, and looking forward to going bigger with this machine and seeing how big I can really cut my stencils. It is much louder and slower than the Cricut though, so I won't be getting rid of my Cricut just yet. If you're a beginner with these machines, I would still recommend the Cricut just as the software is much easier to use and the blades are easier to find. Another thing I noticed, which was a bit weird, is that the software in the Silhouette also tends to remove some details and smoothens the lines out even more. So that's one thing to be aware of. So always add a bit of detail when you export stuff out of Photoshop if you're going to cut on the Silhouette. But I'm pretty happy with this purchase, and for the deal that I bought it for, I'm pretty happy. Now we're up to my favorite bit, and that is the painting. It's always so satisfying throwing some paint around after you put the time into creating your stencils. So for this one, I was thinking about doing a bit of a darker background. So there's nothing I enjoy painting more than an awesome space scene. So I start off by throwing some black down and then throwing some color around using my cloud stencil. After that, I'll be putting down my stencil and throwing some white on it, and then after that, just throwing some white on it to put on some stars. So enjoy the painting portion, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.